Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So if you've been following along, I've given a couple of sessions so far this week, and so have the rest of my colleagues. It's been a progression of information from us, trying not to repeat ourselves, talking about the evolutionary approach to cloud, talking about the revolutionary approach to cloud, talking about some pragmatic steps you can take. I'm going to continue the conversation today. If you have come to my previous sessions, you'll know that I've dressed down today. New York City, yes, I've been told that New York is where business casual means no cufflinks. So today I'm going the full California style as much as I can. I'm going to talk about following your path to cloud, because delivering cloud computing is really about delivering business, okay? And this is really critical. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on background today. I want to really talk about how you can choose your own path to cloud. But just to set the stage, the demand for IT service is essentially outstripping the supply. We've got a situation where we fell off a little bit of a cliff in 2008, 2009, with the recession, the credit crisis, the global financial crisis, whatever you call it in your part of the world. And we dropped budget, we dropped IT resources, it was very difficult, but we rebounded a little bit in terms of business demand. There's a bit of shakiness in various economies, depending on where you are in the world, but it seems to be coming back up at least slowly, 1-2%, maybe not as sharp as this chart shows. But that gives us a gap between business and IT. And we talk about the alignment of business and IT, and this is a fundamental way of showing that this gap is actually growing. So we've got to do something about it. IT needs a game changer. You can't make incremental change at this point to keep up with that problem. So we see cloud computing as a significant part of the difference maker. We say 80% of organizations surveyed have implemented at least one type of cloud service. The other 20% just don't know that they've implemented a type of cloud service. Over 50% have more than 6 different types of cloud service. That's pretty phenomenal. So people are starting to understand that this is really important. But how do you find your way to cloud computing? And we see essentially 2 principal ways of getting to the cloud. The evolutionary approach. I spoke a lot about this on Monday morning, and of course you'll be able to get these, I think these conference proceedings and sessions available afterwards. You can review that. But essentially what we're talking about there is leveraging existing platforms, leveraging your technologies, virtualization, automation, leveraging the investment you already have made in sunk cost, but also in people, in process, to be able to get to a more agile, more flexible cloud environment. The other approach is the revolutionary approach. So adopting a cloud-fast approach, using cloud for what I call cloud-native applications. And I sort of distinguish between the idea of a cloud-native application and a cloud-migrant application. And you think about cloud-native, certainly software as a service, things like Salesforce.com. You think also of social and mobile. They almost have to live in cloud computing, just simply due to the scale. Big data is another area that's coming up that EMC certainly are promoting, this idea of large petabyte data sets, which are almost cloud native. But adopting those and in greenfield environments, getting to cloud fast, getting to cloud now. These are the 2 paths that I want to talk about today, just to give you an idea. And I'll tell you a little bit about how to evolve to private cloud first. So again, I covered this in detail on Monday morning. I've only got, I think, 30 minutes this morning. So I'm not going to be able to get into too much depth, but I want to talk about that evolutionary path. And if you were on my session on Monday, I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat just this one slide. You start with virtualization. A lot of you have probably already got some of this in your environment, maybe all of this in your environment. A lot of people have multiple hypervisors. So virtualization is the foundation for this evolutionary approach. You need to get to cloud. It can be a little bit of a way away. And it's a clear path, though. You start by consolidating your infrastructure. Virtualization helps you do that. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's a good start. It's multiple VMs on larger boxes, gets more cost efficiency, you get CapEx savings here. Optimize that environment, make sure you're dealing with things like VM sprawl, make sure you're understanding configurations, licenses, assets, and so forth. Then you move into automation. So you start to get fast. You start to get more flexible. You start to do things at computer speed, not people speed. The department of no becomes the department of yes. because you can answer those business inquiries and business requests really quickly. And then you actually get to the real dynamic and agile self-service IT. And if you, again, followed my session on Monday morning, you'll know that this eventually satisfies all 5 of the essential characteristics of cloud computing according to NIST. Now, along the way, you change the focus of what you're delivering, but you deliver at every step along the way. So you deliver CapEx savings when you start to consolidate. So the consolidation delivers really good cost savings around physical hardware, maybe rent data centers, labs. You can close down some of your labs, consolidate not just physical servers, but consolidate data centers, for example. Even consolidate business units because you're getting a lot tighter. Then at the optimization phase, you start to do things better and cheaper. And so you're reducing OpEx cost, operational cost. A lot of that is around having the right staff allocations for what you're trying to do. But you can also start to do things like rationalize software licenses. The automation side, you're starting to get real agility involved because you can do things fast, quickly. Computer speed, not human speed. And then when you get to dynamic IT, you can actually start to develop new products and services faster, get to market faster, be more competitive, and actually drive real shareholder value, including new revenue sources. And so cloud is not just a way of saving cost. In fact, for some people, it will not necessarily save you cost. That's the dirty little secret of cloud. But it can certainly drive things like agility and revenue. And that's pretty cool. Now, you've got to get different approaches to management to do this, starting out by managing your virtualization environment, move up the chain to managing your virtual systems, and then move it up again to managing the whole virtual service. Now, it's not necessarily simple to get from step to step to step, and I talked on Monday about how you use virtualization management at the early stages to manage those virtual components. Use infrastructure automation to automate your physical and virtual infrastructure in efficient and effective ways. And use service automation to uplift that and integrate and orchestrate the connection between automation and service management so that the end users start to get control of their own environment. So I just want to give you an idea of how you can do that. Now, CA Technologies obviously has some solutions which do this. CA Virtual Automation is the agile provisioning engine. You need to start with something like this. I'm not saying necessarily CA, I don't want to make this too much of a product pitch. But you need to start with an automation tool set that can provision out of a resource pool a virtual machine. Track it, provide license management, security. Just provisioning a virtual machine is not enough. Otherwise, you start to get up against problems around compliance, around too many provisioning, too much VM sprawl happening, things like that. So you also need to deal with configurations at that point. And this is one of the base elements, being able to deal with configuration and compliance, patch management, especially with virtual machines. It's really easy for virtual machines to go out of compliance, with patch schedules especially. Because virtual machines sometimes are not even running when you run your patch cycle. So you've got to understand and be able to deal with the configuration in a dynamic and automated way. You need to be able to manage the performance of those machines as well. Just because you go virtual doesn't mean performance automatically gets better. You need to be able to monitor, manage, and assure the level of performance and availability you're delivering to end users. And you need to be able to secure it as well, especially those privileged users who have access to the root in the ESX host, for example, who have access to change settings, change configurations within the Hyper-V environment, within the Zen environment. You need to be able to protect and secure and track and audit those privileged users. Audit is actually something I'm not going to cover too much today, but it's absolutely critical to understand around configuration, around the automation of provisioning and so forth. Codifying processes gives you audit trail. And a lot of the big concern about moving into a cloud environment is you start to lose control and visibility and audit and tracking. This is why this sort of stuff becomes absolutely critically important. And so we look at companies that have done this. For example, this is a leading online marketplace. They auction stuff online. I can't say who they are. Millions of users globally. You might be able to take a little bit of a guess. This is a phenomenal business. Now, what their issue was they were replicating their huge production environment into a test environment to do development. Now, they were using VMware on their production environment, but they didn't want to spend the money on VMware in their test environment. So they started to deploy Hyper-V. They already had the licenses for it, but they had a single tool set which would allow them to use Hyper-V and VMware from a single environment so they could replicate into test, run on test, do QA on VMware, and then put it into production on VMware. So they were able to save themselves actually a huge amount of money just by doing this. But it was all automated, it was fast. The solution itself was relatively inexpensive, but it was an on-ramp. This is the thing which I want to try and impress to you. Get your toes wet. Put your toes in the water of cloud. Start automating your virtual systems, okay? If you can automate virtual systems out of a resource pool, maybe with a little bit of chargeback, then all of a sudden you've got a bunch of the characteristics of cloud. Maybe it's not fully cloud, because there's a lot of stuff in cloud. But think about how you can do this to just get your feet wet, get experience, maybe even fail a couple of times in areas that don't matter so much, and get used to it from using your internal environment. Now, we also have another organisation we've worked with, a large healthcare provider. Again, I can't tell you their name. You would know them. They actually picked up this whole virtual suite, and so they went in a little bit deeper. So the first thing they did was they provided automation, configuration, security, and assurance for their virtual components. The first step on the evolutionary path to cloud computing. So you can start today. You know, this stuff is not pie in the sky. A lot of the discussions that I've heard are about the end state of cloud. Think how you can get to step one first, and this is one way. Now, there's the second step, the infrastructure automation, virtual and physical. Now, this is really important. 100% of virtual systems run on physical systems, okay? People think about virtual as this thing that exists ephemerally without any physical componentry, and that's obviously just, you know, not right. You've got to think about how you manage the physical systems underneath as well. They are a limiting factor in capacity, for example. I was talking last night with some interesting people, and the topic came up that just because you have two systems doesn't mean that you can treat them as one system. The physical box matters. You know, when you talk about virtualization in cloud, it would be nice to have this grid approach where it doesn't matter. And, you know, I'll talk a little bit later about some ways you might be able to do that. But when you talk about capacity and performance and so forth, the physical systems matter. So you've got to manage physical and virtual together. And again, very similar disciplines: automation, configuration management. But when you start to get to that second level, you need to bring in automation at a different level, process automation. Okay, you've all got workflows, you've got run books, they might be in your head, they might be written down. Some of you might have codified some process, but I talked on Monday about the idea of standardize on known good process. And automate it and put it into automation tools. You then end up with documentation, with an audit trail, with functional isolation, and it all happens at computer speed. And that's a very strong step on the way. So we've done this with Qualcomm. You will all know Qualcomm is a major chip manufacturer. They actually had a problem. I talked about this on Monday. Again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating some of this stuff. I'm trying not to. Where they were running out of data center space. And if you're in a position where you're running out of data center space, it's not incremental cost that you're going to have to deal with. It's massive and radical additional cost. So you need to find ways to avoid that. And Qualcomm did it by instantiating new data center, essentially pods, using the Cisco UCS with physical and virtual automation to be able to automate the provisioning of new design systems to their engineers, who use fairly complex server-based CAD development. It's very high-powered equipment, very costly stuff if they needed to build a new data center. They managed to avoid building a new data center by consolidating and automating. And they had some level of internal self-service, so they still weren't providing the external self-service to their end customers, but to their internal engineers. They were providing a very strong level of automation of process. They already had good process whereby they were able to deploy systems in a short time. They were able to figure out when those systems became important, so moving from real sort of sandbox test environments to, you know, important development environments into QA lockdown environments and then into production mission critical environments, different kinds of protection, data protection, security, management, backup are needed at each of these phases along the way. And this was a complex workflow. There were approvals built in as well. And so there was a lot of complexity taken out by codifying and standardizing and automating process. So that's a really important element on that path to cloud computing, the evolution using existing infrastructure. That was an enterprise. We've done this with service providers as well. Logicalis in the UK and in other parts of the world, but primarily the UK, have done this again using Cisco UCS, using NetApp storage, using VMware virtualization, using CA technologies for the automation and management. And they're able to now provide a revenue-generating cloud service for their customers, which is actually a really exciting thing for them and for us, quite frankly. So the third area along that way is service automation. So this is where you connect the service management and the orchestration and automation together. So you talk about the 5 essential characteristics of cloud, and one of them is self-service. You've got to have a user front end. You've got to have something like Service Catalog. But also when you talk about service management, you're starting to talk about performance and assurance. You're starting to talk about defining your services in a catalog, providing access to those services through, for example, a service desk interface. You need to be able to provide management of service levels. It's interesting. People talk about, does ITIL and IT service management go away because of cloud? No, it doesn't, but it does fundamentally change. So you may be able to use existing disciplines, but you probably need to use different tools. Because the idea, for example, that every single change you make in the cloud has to go to a change approval board is going to really damage your credibility, but also your success. And so at CA Technologies, we're providing new technologies around things like service desk, asset and inventory management, service level management, service portfolio management, planning and understanding what is your service portfolio and moving forward with that. Connecting it internally and externally. See, this is another potential problem that you might come into. How do you connect management of your external cloud with your internal cloud, public and private? Then how do you connect all that with your legacy infrastructure? Okay? If you're doing it all in silos, that's going to be an issue. You're going to end up with training problems, staffing problems, cost overruns, inefficiencies. You need to figure out ways to connect all of your worlds together. Otherwise, you're going to end up with this bifurcation or trifurcation, is that even a word, of your different technologies. So think about how you can connect them all together. And CA Technologies is doing this. Raymond James is one customer of ours that they actually started with the service management approach. Their big problem was really about managing the vast array of services they had. So this is actually an object lesson as well. Start with what makes sense. I give you a consolidation, optimization, automation, dynamic pathway, but for some of you it will make sense to start with automation. For some of you it will make sense to start with service management. Do what makes sense. Don't let any of this, the people standing up on stage like me preach to you about this like it's religion or like it's dogma. There's no room for that. It's business. I said that that's why I put that slide up at the very start. It's about doing business. And if your business is going to benefit more from codifying and standardizing your service portfolio and providing some level of access to that, even before you start to automate, then that's what you should be doing. Do what's right for your business today. So, why would you take this approach, the step-by-step or the evolutionary approach? There's a lot of reasons, but the primary one is to protect and leverage your existing investment in technology and in people and in process. Because if you're running IT yourself, you've got value in that IT deployment. And it may be some inefficiencies, there may be some problems, it may not be as fast as you want, but you're delivering value to your business because you're running IT. And don't let people tell you you're not. So you want to leverage that if you can. You need to sometimes maintain your multi-platform environment. We saw the speaker before talk about what did he say? He didn't say legacy, exotic platforms, I think he called them, like the mainframe. Makes me think of setting up a Z196 in Hawaii. I'd love to do that. That'd be nice. An exotic platform. But quite seriously, I mean, I think he was talking about things like Unix as well, by the way. Linux, AS400. I was talking to an organization recently that actually has burrows in their environment. Really? You'd be surprised how much of the stuff at the airport, most of you are going to be traveling sometime in the next couple of days. A lot of the equipment at the airport is running on really old equipment. That scares me just a little. But you need to, sometimes you've got this investment that you need to protect. You've got challenges sometimes in unraveling it. And we saw this list of things that Amazon wants you to do before you move to an Amazon cloud. And that's all well and good if you can untangle the mess that is your current IT infrastructure. Applications, connections, APIs, SDKs, how well documented is it all? What happens when you move a server? Do you break the connections to your database and storage? Do you break your network connections to the endpoint, to the desktop? Some of that can happen. And if you're moving to a public cloud, some of that gets really messy. So sometimes it's just easier to use what you've got. And there's challenges with skills. I mean, if you're running an internal IT department, how many people know how to use the Rackspace API? How many people know how to use Amazon in the most effective way? And we saw some very big organizations suffer from not knowing how to architect their environment. So Amazon EBS goes down, and then all of a sudden Reddit goes down and Quora goes down, but Netflix doesn't, because Netflix knew how to architect their environment for public cloud, but the Reddit, Quora, and a whole bunch of others, they were down for 3 days because they didn't have the skills and the understanding of how to architect for that external environment. So if you don't know that, then maybe the internal private cloud is the way to go for you. Just a couple of decision factors. There's a lot more, but I haven't got time. I'll move on now to understanding a little bit more about the second approach, the revolutionary approach to cloud. So typically, historically, our environments have been effectively chained to hardware. The operating system and the app was on one server or maybe on 2 servers, but it was essentially tied and chained to the hardware, which was a bit of a bummer. We weren't very flexible. It was pretty expensive. We weren't using our infrastructure very well. So we went to virtualization. That was a good change. Very happy with that. Saved a lot of money. Decoupled the infrastructure from the service that you were delivering. So the hypervisor, separated the physical layer from the operating system and the app. But when you think about it, there's a lot more stuff in a service than just this virtual app, right? Because you've got, these are just some examples, switches, load balancers, SANs, but you've got things like firewalls, middleware, WAN acceleration, all of this stuff comes in hardware or software. We were still chained, right? We're still chaining the operating system and the app to these devices, even though we're virtualized. So then you've got other, multi-tier and complex environments, then you've got multiple VMs involved. So we're still chained down, we're still complex. There's more flexibility in virtualization. It's not a bad thing, but it's still chained down. So think about the revolutionary approach of moving to a virtual fabric, where yes, you've got virtualization, yes, you've got physical servers, everything runs on physical somewhere. Even Amazon's got physical servers. Shh, don't tell anyone. But you can connect multiple complex tiers of your application, web server, database server, operating system, as well as things like virtual switches, firewalls, virtual load balancers, WAN acceleration systems, and create this virtual business service. Remember I was talking about the evolutionary approach. You move your management up chain from components to systems to services. This is how you do that fast. Get to cloud fast with a virtual fabric approach. Build out these virtual business services that are fully encapsulated, which makes them highly mobile, portable. You can start to take advantage of cloud burst really easily. You can start to use this as a DR strategy. You can do all sorts of amazing things. It makes you faster to deploy, faster to scale up, faster to scale in and save cost when you're not using all of that capacity. So you can, even think about how you can build in management agents. Think about how you can configure and self-configure that environment. Think about how you can collapse your cycle times because you've got predefined business services which you can instantiate with the click of a mouse. That becomes extremely powerful when you're talking about trying to go to market with new products and services, trying to beat your competitors' timelines to get to market first and get those first mover advantages. And again, I talked about the revenue generating opportunities of dynamic IT as the fourth step in the evolutionary approach, but you get it pretty much straight away if you go with this revolutionary fabric approach. So you're moving from traditional IT deployment, which is waterfall style, the code plus the database plus the content developed separately, managed separately, built out separately, configured separately, plus all of the ancillary equipment, firewalls, load balancers, SANs, WAN acceleration, monitoring tools, databases, and security tools, etc. And you're moving to an application-centric model where the service is fully encapsulated. And you can build that out, the same infrastructure, but created dynamically, on demand, and discarded after use using greenfield commodity hardware on your own data center. Real cloud, real fast in your site. That's pretty powerful. Now we've done this obviously. CA's solution for this is called 3 Tera App Logic. It's a revolutionary approach to cloud, we believe. Quickly creating, deploying, managing, and replicating business services. Not just components, not just virtual applications, but whole managed business services. Treating the infrastructure and the application as a single object. Think about object-oriented coding and how that made it really easy to reuse objects and how that made your development cycles faster. Imagine if you can reuse entire business services to make your product and service delivery faster. That's phenomenal stuff. And automate it, do it at computer speed, not human speed. The business benefits there are really out of sight. And we've done this again with, this is PGI, this is a pretty interesting company, they're virtual meetings. Online virtual collaboration and conferencing. They provide these services in 24 countries. They serve 90% of the Fortune 500. This is a pretty significant organization. They use 3 Tera App Logic to be able to do this. They can find, when they get an order for a large conferencing requirement for an online conference, they can find the right infrastructure at the right price, deploy 3 Tera App Logic, a business service, which for them is their collaboration and conferencing service, deploy that onto the right sized cloud in the right location at the right price, essentially taking advantage of even things like spot cloud markets, which are starting to emerge. So you can see there's cost saving there, there's agility there. They can use their own internal infrastructure. If they get one client that all of a sudden wants a huge online conference, they can use external infrastructure and their cost stays very, very predictable. They don't have to go out and buy 60 new servers just for one client for one conference. So yeah, a pretty phenomenal result there. You can see the provisioning time was faster, so they're agile, they're getting dynamic. Because they can do this, they can offer online conferencing services to organizations that maybe they couldn't have served from their own private hardware. So why would you take this revolutionary approach, this turnkey cloud approach, this cloud fast approach? Again, I'll just give you 4 reasons, but I could probably give you 40 if we had the time. So it's economics and an agility game changer. We talk about that growing alignment gap and the need to fundamentally change the game. This is a fundamental revolution in how you deliver cloud. It's right there in the name, the revolutionary approach. So it changes the way you do it, it changes the economics of how you do it because you get to cloud fast. You get to focus on business, not infrastructure. It's all about business, right? I mean, a lot of us do IT because we love IT. I'm a geek for life. But we get paid to do it because it's a good business. We're there to serve the business objective. And being able to provide this level of agility with a great economic basis means it's a business outcome. You get to maintain your margins. This is really important for service providers especially. I would counsel large enterprises to think more like service providers as well. providing a guaranteed level of service, documented, contracted with the business. We're at a price point that gives you a level of profit margin. You know, and if you're using expensive individual VMs and VM apps and VApps to try and provide a cloud service, there's cost involved in that. But if you can do it with a virtual business service, then you're getting rid of a lot of the cost basis. And so you're able to build a delivery service with a good margin. For service providers, that's absolutely critical. And I would say for enterprises, you need to start thinking that way as well, because enterprise IT is going to compete with service providers for business. And if you don't have this kind of good approach, then you're going to lose that competition. And it lets you rapidly uncover and address new business opportunities. If you've got this highly mobile, predefined business service, I mean, think about PGI. The ability to instantly get a customer to sign up with your service because you know for a fact you can deliver, based on your IT capability, what they need in a very short amount of time, instantly perhaps, then you're going to get that business. Against maybe a competitor who says, yes, give us 3 months and we'll be ready for you. So you can actually get, again, new revenue generating opportunities. Stage 4 of the evolutionary cycle is available instantly if you take the revolutionary approach. So choose one or both. That's really important. This is not either or. You may get benefits from both approaches. And with CA Technologies you can. We try to deliver to our customers strong value around standardization, automation, configuration, orchestration, letting them dynamically allocate their systems, manage identities, manage personalities, assure performance, to let our customers manage their change, reduce their complexity, to be able to reduce staff pressure, to be able to get fast and agile, but maintain visibility and control and security and audit and compliance, so that they can do things like improve productivity, maintain their margins and even improve their margins, support mobility, support social, deliver new revenues, because it's all about the business. So just to wrap up before I think we have a couple of minutes maybe for questions. No more minutes for questions. So please come around booth 317. The Expo doesn't open until 10:30. So this slide is wrong. I will be signing copies of this book at 11 at the CA Technologies booth. I'll have a limited number of copies to give away. So I hope you'll come around and say hi. So thank you very much
Thank you
for coming.
Candyman. Speak for